Continuing on homophones, this is the last part, part 3 of 3. And next is number 16, allowed versus allowed. So this allowed means out loud. If you look in here, you can see the OU. It's almost spelling the word out loud. So as an example, I could say, I read the poem aloud, so everybody could hear. This allowed means to permit. I allowed the kids to stay up till midnight. And that is number 16. Number 17, lie versus lay. So the first one, lie, yes, that does mean something that's untrue, but more importantly, it means to recline. I would like to lie on that couch. The other word, lay, means to place or to put. If I take something like a book and I put it on top of a table, that would be lay. I'm going to lay the book on the table. So that's lie versus lay. As a quick side note, I could say, if I'm talking about potato chips, I'm going to lay the lays on the table, and that would be correct, because I'm going to place or put something. 18, it's versus its. So we got IT apostrophe S. Remember that apostrophe shows a contraction. It represents two or more words. In this case, it means it is, and it always means it is. For example, if we were to say it's raining outside, we could say it is raining outside, and that would make sense. So that means we have to use IT apostrophe S. The other it's means belongs to. For example, I could say the dog was licking its tail. We're talking about ownership here. It's being used as an adjective. It's tail. The next word has to be a noun of some form or another. And that's number 18. Number 19, capital versus capital. Let's look at the second one for a moment, the one that's spelled with an O. That always means a building. So, for example, the Oval Office. Oval begins with O, office begins with O. So we're always talking about a building if we're using the one that has an O in it. So, for example, if I said the Capitol, where lawmakers meet, is undergoing renovations, we would use the second one. So if you know that, then by default, you know when to use the other spelling. This is used when we're talking about like a capital letter. It's also used when we're talking about money. I need capital to start my business. It's also used to refer to cities. If I said the capital city of Nebraska is Lincoln, I would have to use the one that ends with A-L. So capital versus capital. Number 20, principal versus principal. Let's look at this first one that ends in P-A-L, pal. So if you think of the principal of a school, if he's really nice and he's really cool, he could be your friend or your pal. So that's what we're talking about here. This first word, principal, means the head of a school or organization. Let's look at this other example here, the one that ends in P-L-E, or this other word. Principle, in this case, means a law or a truth, a basic tenet. For example, I could say one of my personal principles is to always be honest, or always try to be honest. So that's the difference between principle versus principle. And that's number 20, but stay tuned for bonus. Okay, bonus time. We're going to talk about who versus whom. A lot of people get these confused. Let's take a moment to look at this. To use this trick, you have to do a couple things. First thing you have to do is whatever the question is, you have to answer it immediately. You almost have to pretend that somebody's holding a gun to your head and you have to answer immediately. And this guy doesn't care about grammar one bit. He just wants to know the answer to his question. When you're answering the question, it has to be he or him. So if somebody said, who let the dogs out? You know, it was some guy. Can't be a girl, some guy. You never know his name. So he's got the gun to your head and says, who let the dogs out? You have to say, he let the dogs out. He let the dogs out. So in this situation, notice that he does not end with an E. That means it matches with who. So in that situation, if he said, who let the dogs out, he would be correct. So again, who let the dogs out? And the correct way to ask that question would be, who let the dogs out? Let's change the question. Let's say some guy breaks in and he says, who did you give the money to? So you don't have time to worry about grammar. You just have to say, I gave the money to him. You would never say, I gave the money to he. You'd say, I gave the money to him. So notice, him ends with an M. That means when this question is asked, you have to have an M on the end of this word. So you wouldn't say, who did you give the money to? You'd say, whom did you give the money to? So you have to stop and think. You have to answer the question quickly using he or him. Then you can go back and use the proper word. Let's look at a few examples together. In these examples, someone is going to ask us a question right away. We have to answer the question immediately in a complete sentence. We're not worrying about grammar, so let's look at example 1 at this time. Who do you love? We have to answer, I love him, is what you would say. So, because him ends with an M, the correct word has to end with an M. That means whom is what we would put in here, and that is the only correct answer. So we would not say, who do you love? We would have to say, whom do you love? Look at example 2. Who left the gate open? You got to answer in a complete sentence. You wouldn't say, him left the gate open. You'd say, he left the gate open. He left the gate open. There is no M there, so just put in the regular word who. Now that is correct. Who left the gate open? Let's look at a couple more quick examples on this. I know this can be tricky for some people. Example 3. Blank did you call? So somebody's asking, who did you call? We have to ask right away. You would say, I called him. Wouldn't ever say, I called he. So, because him ends with an M, our word that we're going to use has to end with an M. So, whom did you call would be correct. Let's look at a final example here, number 4. Number 4. So the question being asked, who took the trash out? We would answer by saying, he took the trash out. We'd never say, him took the trash out. So, because that does not end with an M, we just use the regular word who. So, who took the trash out is correct here. That's the difference between who and whom. This will always work in every situation. So you have to answer the question in a complete sentence using he or him, and then make sure you have a match when you're selecting the correct word. Who is used as a subject and whom is used as a direct object for those of you who are into grammar terminology.